Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords. Tried filming this once already and my camera fell down, so let's hope that doesn't repeat itself. Today, I am reviewing Wretched Apocalypse by Joe Coombs and Miguel Ribeiro, done by the Red Room. And where is that? So this is another one of the series of products. It doesn't say the Red Room anyways, but it's the Red Room. It's the Wretched verse, right? And this is another in a series of RPGs done by there's their Red Room. There we go. There's another series of games done by the Red Room that are all OSR games that have their particular kind of spaghetti Western feel to them, with like, you know, anti-hero type or outright scumbags. And this one, of course, as you can see, you know, they've done so far. We've had like the Belle Epoque, the Wild West, space, and now this is obviously post-apocalypse. And this is, from what I've seen, it's a lot more kind of the really gritty sort of Mad Max type post-apocalypse than the than kind of goofy post-apocalypse, right? This is definitely not along the lines of like Gamma World or something like that. You know, like it's taken in a more serious bent. But there are a number of options that you can use depending on how you want to present it. But I mean, it makes sense, given the nature of the Wretched verse, that this should be a scummy apocalypse along with, you know, everything else. And, you know, the kind of the spaghetti Western style of the Wretched verse is not something that lends itself to Gonzo, right? It's very hard to unless you're doing it in a completely sarcastic way. You know, this stuff is not, that stuff is, right? You can definitely have a version of the good, the bad, and the ugly in the apocalypse, you know, as long as it's this kind of apocalypse and not one with space bears and you know, robots and, you know, weird mutants and funky wizards. So yeah, the game is, you know, I often wonder how much I should repeat myself about the basics. Let's start by saying that the game is OSR standard, which is to say, the majority of the rules are based on old school D&D. It's completely compatible with any other OSR product, or with very little adaptation. So let's focus on the things that make this special. One of the things that you know, if you've seen the other reviews of the Wretchedverse games, one of the ones that's important here is that you have, instead of like worrying about alignment, what you pick when you create a character is one of the 7 deadly sins, which is like, it represents the sinful nature of your particular character. And what is their great flaw, right? What are they obsessed with? Sloth, lust, greed, yeah, etc. Ability scores are standard. There is a skill point system, so you get extra skill points depending on the score you have in the ability. Not my favorite idea. Skill points are never a good idea, but let's see how that goes. And then you get to like races. So there's the normal humans. There are mutants here, but the mutants are definitely not like the mutants that appear in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, which are, you know, weird in a wonderful, how would we put it? Well, in a Gonzo way would be the best way to put it, but in a way that is meant to be kind of surrealist. Here, mutants are basically people who've been horribly damaged by radiation, and they have, you know, they get bonuses to resisting toxins and so on. They can be psychic in theory, so there is that. Like you also get in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. Because I mean, I've never done a a post-apocalyptic game, and I probably never will in the sense of a post-apocalypse game that what you normally assume is a post-apocalypse, right? Either, during an apocalypse happening, like, a zombie game, or, very relatively shortly after, years or decades after, in a kind of, Fallout scenario or whatever. Technically, World of the Last Sun is a post-apocalyptic game, but it takes place like 10,000 years after the apocalypse. So what you have is a bunch of really odd, ruined societies, which is kind of what happens after an apocalypse, like we saw after the fall of Rome or the Mongol invasion. Anyways, but I'm never going to do something like this, right? And the mutants here, their mutations are really not. If you're looking at the screen there, you can see some examples, right? Like -2 to social rules. You only have one eye, scabs and spots, your crooked spine, right? Like mutations are bad, right? Now, you can add in. Excuse me, sneezed. You can add in optionally some kind of weirder mutations, right? So it's really clever that the Red Room is adding different options for different styles. You also have an optional race, which is a robot, in case your apocalypse is like the Rise of the Machines sort of thing, right? And you have a robot generator. Hey, you get that in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion too. This is it's a pretty good set of tables. It's not bad. Not too unlike the one that I have in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion as well. Main function, yeah, I've got that. Quirky traits. Oh, look at that. I have the same thing in mine. Well, good for the Red Room. Okay. So this is not exactly the same, but it's very, very similar. If you look at the robot generator, it has like weird personality traits for robots and stuff. But that's great, Then you get class and archetype. So the class is just, what you would assume, a character class in an OSR game is, right? So the classes are the assassin, common citizen, cyborg, investigator, man of action, proselytizer, pilot, driver, psionic, rogue, and scholar. Some of these are listed as optional classes, right? So you can choose whether or not you have psionics in your game. You can choose whether or not you have cybernetics in your game, right? Jeez. Well, there you go, guys. No sign of meatball, but you get to hear me blowing my nose. That sneeze was disruptive. I don't have a cold or anything. It's just a random sneeze. I don't know what that was. Some dust, I guess. All right. So the class gives you all the standard stuff, hit points, whatever. Your starting skills gives you a number of skill points. And then there's also archetypes. So you can, when you get an archetype, apparently the main thing that you get is a predetermined perk and skill, which is okay, I guess. So for an example, you have the assassin, which is the class, and then you can pick for archetype, a hired gun or a serial killer. This is kind of a bit like in my Star Adventurer book. In the Star Adventurer book, you have classes, and then there are like specialties in the class, right? So you could be if you're a warrior, you can be a mob enforcer, or you can be a hitman, or you can be, a soldier, and you can pick which of those, sort of subclasses you take, and they give you separate bonuses. So these are basically kind of like subclasses. Which I know is atypical in the OSR, but as I just pointed out, not unheard of. I should mention, by the way, the book is 216 pages, more or less. And as you can see, it's got very nice color. The illustrations, which as I understand are mostly AI art. The archetypes keep being, your standard stuff that you would expect to see in a post-apocalyptic setting. Class tables. All right, so you get skills and bonus skill points Um, that so far is the thing I'm most dubious about in this book. That and perks, because perks are another thing similar similarly problematic. So with the perks, you have beneficial traits that give characters bonuses to rolls or other advantages, while drawbacks get penalties. At character creation, each archetype has a selection of perks from which the player can choose one for free. More can be added, but they have to be balanced by choosing a drawback for each new perk. So this is the sort of stuff I don't like in old school games, especially, but also in general, is that here you basically have skill points and feat points for all intents and purposes, right? If you don't have these two things, your character creation can take literally under 5 minutes. As soon as you have these two things, people have to think about, what's the best combination? What advantage and disadvantage can I take that gives me the minimum disadvantage and the maximum advantage for the type of character I want to make? How many points should I put into each thing? I've got to think about this, and then suddenly you could be taking 2 hours to make a character. It's not great. I mean, I don't know if you'd get to 2 hours. That's more like in the kind of point buy where you've got okay, you have 100 points and you can divide it anywhere you like. And there's 80 skills, and skills have variable points per skill bonus costs and stuff like that. But it'll still take you a lot longer to make a character, and there's more chance of system mastery coming into play, which is to say that characters who are obsessively reading the rules will know how to manipulate the rules to have a better character than people who are just casual players. And that's what I don't like. You got social standing rules here, rules on aging, which seems a bit optimistic and unnecessary for an apocalyptic campaign, but hey, who knows? I guess it's important if you're playing a character who's already old. Okay, so you got the skills. Skills are divided into subgroups of mental, physical, and social. The skill bonus from abilities are spent in one of these groups. Skills aren't necessarily tied to a specific ability. You need to roll against a difficulty class. So the way the skill checks work seem to be basically the same as in my games, which is very standard these days in OSR stuff. There are some skills you can use untrained. There's rules for cooperation. So you can see it's a list that takes a whole page, and you end up having somewhere around between 2 to 4, and then you've got the bonus skill points, and so you got to decide where you're going to put all that stuff in there, and it's too much work, man. Too much work. That's why I don't have skill systems in my game. But okay, some people might like that. Then there's special martial arts maneuvers that are part of having the martial arts skills. And not only that, now you've got a skill that gives direct combat benefits. That's definitely not something that everybody's going to try to min-max. Yeah. Acting, carousing, perks. Here we go. So perks are things like one or more of the character's senses are sharper than ordinary, providing a +3 bonus on all perception rolls. They're feats. They're just feats. So this is incorporating stuff from 3rd edition into your game. And again, these are a problem because then people start doing system mastery crap, right? If they were random, if it was okay, you get a random feat and a random disadvantage, that's awesome. If they're not random, then that creates a scenario where certain players are going to figure out ways to manipulate the rules for their benefit and create characters that will therefore be more optimal than other people's characters. And never mind, if some of these feats, I don't know if there are or not, but if some of these feats are spaceship owner, okay, I guess you could have a spaceship in some versions of post-apocalypse. But if some of these feats have stuff that is questionable, well, for example, spaceship owner is listed as optional, so no, that would not be a good example, right? But especially when you get into the disadvantages, right? you're going to see people are arguing constantly about when, for example, someone should have a -2 for all rolls in which a character's anxiety kicks in, right? So, like, how bad is that meant to be, right? Because obviously, if a guy takes anxiety disorder and he's wanting to min-max, he will argue that he's almost never anxious, actually, because he's like this super guy, right? Like, he's sexually alluring and he's, whatever, he's a sex bomb. And he's apparently a lot of sex stuff here, right? But he has a high pain threshold. He's a gunslinger and a ghost. Actually, he shouldn't ever have anxiety. That's how these sort of things always work out. There's always going to be some asshole in the group who's going to be all about trying to game the system of stuff like advantages and disadvantages. It's one of the big reasons why I hate that kind of, you can pick an advantage, but then you get a disadvantage. And so then it becomes a game of picking the best possible advantage for the type of character you have and picking a disadvantage that is of no importance whatsoever, right? So again, I mean, like in a game like this, Jesus, okay, disadvantage. I have a dependent, okay, and then I just let him die in the first adventure, and that's the end of my problems, because that you can get that. That'll be something that would totally be able to happen. Your characters, the implication of the dependent is meant to be that you're supposed to tremendously care about this kid, right, or whoever it is, this helpless old man or whatever, the dog, but. If your goal is as a min-maxer, you could just say, well, I'm just going to keep putting him in danger till he dies. And then when he dies, I'll say, oh, my character is sad. And now I don't have any disadvantages. This is why I do not approve of those sort of things. All right. Experience points. You get experience points, obviously, I'm not going to say obviously, but because some of you might not have seen some of the other videos here, but in the Wretched verse, you get experience for fulfilling all of the kind of like capital crimes and sins, right? So like if you act selfishly, you get XP. If you kill people, you get XP. If you steal, if you put yourself first, if you seduce someone, if you survive, you get so you can at the very least get points for surviving. Being devious and untrustworthy, tainting thy neighbors. So this is, on the other hand, genius, right? Like, this is really great. They want to make a game where you're playing ruthless anti-heroes / scum, right? Anything in that range from anti-hero to scum. Okay, that's great. So then you want to get experience points for acting that way. Perfect. So this is brilliant. It's absolutely genius, Now, you could also completely invert this system and say that you get experience points for behaving heroically and nobly, right? And I can see using this sort of system in any type of game where you want to have a strong moral element to the game. I could absolutely see that being fantastic, right? And that's actually something. So you can adjust it, to whatever the code is that you want to. Like, if you want to make a samurai game, well, okay, so you get experience points for fulfilling the elements of the samurai code, right? That's tremendously clever, and I'm probably going to steal it from the Red Room. Like, they may or may not have stolen my robot generator. I'm not actually accusing them of that, but if they saw that and made a set of tables that are their version of it, that is fucking awesome, right? There's not a problem with that. Don't take it the wrong way. I mean, don't be like the Shadow Dark lady, right? And think that when I rib someone for having been inspired by me, like I saw. Let me put it this way: I saw Venture Satanis's Alpha Blue. Right. And I you can see my review of Alpha Blue. I wasn't tremendously impressed by it, but I recognized that there was certain cleverness to parts of it. Right. And so, what I did in World of the Last Sun is I made a locale directly inspired by Alpha Blue that is called Fuck Station Aleph. Right. So I, it's something that is a totally acceptable thing to do in the OSR context, is to be inspired by somebody else's version of a table, a mechanic, a place, a dungeon, or whatever, and then not copy it directly, but make your own inspired version, which is what these guys did. And at some point, I'm telling the people in the Red Room right now, I'm going to make my own inspired version of these rules. Given given the way my system works for experience points in like, Lion and Dragon and that's my series of games, my own verse, as it were, the pundit verse, I'm probably not going to make it be experience points exactly, but I am going to find some way to make this work. And it'll be really clever. It'll be at least as clever as this. But I'm telling you, this is tremendously clever. And it's like, just like that alone is one of the things that is already good enough to justify recommending this game, right? Because it's really brilliant. I mean, assuming you want to play the game with that kind of moral element. But I mean, in post-apocalyptic, especially, morality or immorality is a central theme of post-apocalyptic play, right? Like, what are you like in the wasteland, right? Then there's the wanted level. It's how much your characters are it's basically how characters are known, how infamous they are, so like if there was law and order, it'd be how much they're wanted by the law, I guess. But here there wouldn't be that exactly. There's a wretched pool, which is a pool of bonus points that you can use for having done things connected to the moral framework that they want in the game, right? So when you have one of those, each point you can trade in for a +1 to a roll. And that's it's one of these kind of bonus point mechanics that I'm usually opposed to, but it's so simple. Like the way that they've kept it here is so simple, and it's such a basic thing, right? It's just, okay, it gets you a +1. It's not a huge deal, but it's enough of a deal that people are going to want to behave this way if this is the moral rules that give you those points. So again, really, really clever, actually. Especially clever because it's the type of thing, like those bonus point type rules are not the type of thing I would typically endorse, let's say, right? So wretched characters also can get a rush when they're reduced to 1/5 or less of their hit points with a fight or flight response to survive. So in those moments, they can get a special bonus to physical rolls, but a penalty to mental and social rolls. That's an interesting mechanic. I don't remember if that was in the other ones. Maybe it was and I didn't notice, or maybe this is something specifically new. Or maybe I did notice in previous videos and I've just forgotten now. Combat is basically the same as in every other system. They have a pretty good, in every other OSR system, a pretty good table of melee weapons, projectile weapons. They do have energy weapons there. Descriptions of some of the, okay, so obviously the higher tech weapons are optional. Yeah. So there's a laser malfunction table. That's kind of clever. So all of these are, again, part of the framework of you can decide what type of apocalypse it was. It could just be like a nuclear bomb landed and that's it. Or there could be zombies or killer robots, or, it could have been an apocalypse that happened in the future when there was more advanced technology. Apparently you can have a spaceship. I'm not sure how that works. Why wouldn't you just leave? But well, maybe it's just like a space shuttle or something. Or maybe they just accidentally forgot that from Wretched Space and it's still in there because they forgot. I don't know. Let's see if there's any evidence one way or the other. So there's some special weirdo drugs that you can have. That's great. I mean, I've got lots of drugs in my Last Sun stuff. So you can see that Red Room and me are kind of out of mind about a lot of things. Some good, random negative effects from drugs. Yeah, this is all good stuff. Radiation rules, of course, you must have. Very important. Combat, called shots, auto fire. They still have the dueling rules, which are like a quick way to resolve a gunfight or an attack, sword fight. I'm not super enamored by these because they're a little too quick or so. Like that can work. The pistols thing can kind of work if you're doing a cinematic Wild West sort of thing, or I guess a cinematic post-apocalyptic Wild West, and you want to have that shootout, quick draw at noon sort of thing, high noon, or swords if you're having one of those samurai battles that are one strike or whatever. But I think that it underuses character statistics and depends too much on luck. Critical rolls. So if you get a natural 20, it's a critical hit. And it has a secondary effect. And you roll on tables to determine what was the effect. So this is, again, a lot like the critical tables I have in Lion and Dragon and the Old School Companion 1. Great stuff. I'm really glad to see people taking that same concept and running with it in OSR stuff. So there's purchasing rules. There's an acquisition skill, basically, that is used in place of, keeping track of money, which I guess that's okay. I think that's something that makes a lot of sense if you're doing something like in an advanced, even in a modern setting potentially, or if you're doing something in like an advanced futuristic setting. But in a post-apocalypse setting, you'd think that you just like regulate everything by barter, right? You'd keep careful track of everything you have on you, and there would be no play. I mean, there might be some towns or whatever that have their own like coins or something, and then you could get the coins, right? But the whole point should be that it, like, shouldn't resource management be kind of an important part of a post-apocalyptic game? I guess maybe not all. I mean, if this is meant to be a more cinematic post-apocalyptic game, that's okay. Anyways, that's up to a personal preference. Some vehicle combat rules that include like doing cinematic maneuvers. So that's very important to as homage to Mad Max and everything. So there's like some rules governing how to handle those things. Wasteland vehicle critical hits, defense bonuses for vehicles, tables of ground vehicles and what sort of hit maneuvering speed, etc. they have. Not too different from my Starship combat rules in Star Adventure. Psionics. So this is obviously an optional set of rules, and it has a variety of psionic powers that you get at different ranks or levels. These are probably okay for the type of context of the setting. None of them are, from what I remember reading, none of them are like too goofy, which is important if you're not doing, Gamma World. I mean, not by default, at least, not too goofy. So that seems okay. Of course, that is optional. Then you have like supernatural stuff if you want to have supernatural stuff in your game, and then sentient robots and the beyond. Oh yeah, there's this concept, in case you don't know, called the Beyond, which is part of the Wretched verse, which is like the source of all occult power, which is also kind of like a tiny bit Lovecraftian, but it's not. It's actually very clever how they did it. It's not saying it's Lovecraftian puts out the wrong idea out, really, but it's a sinister sort of force. Let's put it that way, right? That is very dangerous to use. But it's good. It's a good system. Not too much on the occult here, because obviously their assumption is going to be that that's not going to be a main thing. But you do have STDs. I don't remember if they had STDs in the Wild West one. You'd think that one really needs to have that, right? Like, they have some like special diseases that are not your typical ones. Opponents. So there is some built-in setting here in the like monsters, basically. But again, you can choose what kind of monsters or creatures you can have. You can have anything from like a plain old the bomb went off thing, or have it be much more sophisticated than that. And again, there's somewhat of a default setting sort of thing, like an area called the Badlands. The default seems to me to be somewhere in between, like, I'm guessing, because I've never played Fallout and Mad Max, right? You definitely have a huge Mad Max influence in the whole book. I think that's the primary, let's say, the primary inspiration of the default setting of the game. So the wasteland, Talks about resources and life in the wasteland. And then you have other locations, types of locations, settlements, farms, industrial complexes. All that is okay. And then you have rules for building a settlement. This is kind of clever. So you can actually have characters that are 5th level and up build their own settlement, right? And the type of class you have will determine what kind of settlement you have. There's some rules for, the things you need to have to maintain the settlement. Then you have like population growth. It's like domain rules in a post-apocalyptic game. That's great. I like that a lot. And of course, there's random events tables that make it difficult for the settlement to survive. Then you have factions, you have different cults and things like that, movements of the builders, order of the fallen, and then, stuff on mutants, raiders, gangs of the wasteland, the mad hounds, the bad boys, the eaters, dojo and the free hand, the biker borgs, the big butt guts. Okay. So, this, again, totally Mad Max stuff. Then you have like some random tables. These are great for your, for any type of weird, if you're playing any type of post-apocalypse thing or, some shithole planet or something like that, like that. Those are some good tables that you have at the end. Random encounter tables, gang activity tables. It's always good to have some random tables in any book of random events and such. So that's basically it. Just wanted to show you the character sheet here. Wretched Apocalypse is a very fine post-apocalyptic game. I think it's of highly playable quality. You may or may not like the spaghetti Western style of it and the morality of it, but again, you could just completely change that. You could say, you're like paladins of the apocalypse and just change all the deadly sins for the virtues, right? And reward people for being virtuous rather than for being wicked, right? So that's very easy to do. The mechanics of the game are all basically sound, though again, my biggest gripes are really with the whole skill point and perk and disadvantage systems. Those are always something that can be potential landmines depending on your party. Let's put it that way. Whether it's the landmine of the min-maxer or the rules lawyer or the manipulator, or it's the landmine of the like clueless newbie who's going to now spend 4.5 hours trying to figure out what to do with his three skill points or whatever. Yeah. So not my cup of tea. But anyways, check out Wretched Apocalypse. Now, you probably know that Red Room has been banned from DriveThruRPG. So I believe that they have their own storefront. I'm going to double check on that, but regardless of what it is, it's either their own storefront or Big Geek Emporium. I will link in the description to this video where you can pick up Wretched Apocalypse. So give the Red Room some support by picking that up. And while you're at it, be sure to check out my products. You have links to every single product of mine in the description below, including, if you want apocalyptic Gonzo fantasy, late apocalypse Gonzo fantasy, like check out World of Last Sun. The Gonzo Fantasy Companion has tons of stuff, including expanded robot tables that you can check out, and lots of other things for mutant tables too, for that matter. So there's total compatibility here. Like there's definitely stuff from Wretched Apocalypse I could use in my World of the Last Sun campaign. And there's probably stuff from these two that you could use in Wretched Apocalypse, even without, going too far to the Gonzo end of the scale. But check out all my other stuff too: Star Adventure, Invisible College, Lion and Dragon, Dark Albion, Arrows of Indra, and the RPG Pundit presents weekly PDF series. There's like 108 issues of it. You check it out. Speaking of which, the Red Room asked me about this, and I really recommended it to them. And now apparently they also have it currently, every 2 weeks or whatever, every week. I don't know how often they're coming out with them. That I believe they called Wretched Verses. If you check out their Twitter, they're linking to it. It's basically like RPG Pundit Presents, but done by the Red Room, where each issue is a relatively short supplement of some kind that will have either an adventure or some setting material or some weird tables or whatever it is, right? But just like in the RPG Pundit Presents, you've got 108 issues. You can check out all of those, and you're going to find something, probably a dozen something, probably multiple dozens of some things that you will want to use. Be sure to check out the new Wretched Versus books, because you might find cool stuff in there too. And anyways, that's everything for today. Currently smoking nothing yet because I've only gotten up relatively recently. So never mind that. And we'll see you all later.